Hello, welcome back to Straightforward, your Middle East political debate show brought to you by Levant TV with me, Khalil Al-Khawairi. Viewed from Lebanon, the expansion of the Islamic State in parts of Syria and Iraq over the past few months seemed to be a distant development. Viewed from the West, the very Islamic militants in Syria seemed to be the face of democracy in the Arab Spring. And following the Jeddah conference on fighting ISIS, Saudi Foreign Minister Saud al-Faisal condemned atrocities in the name of Islam. Meanwhile, John Kerry insists that ISIS terrorism is un-Islamic and President Obama is still for no boots on the ground. Back to Lebanon, everyone seems to be asking the same question: are they coming here? The possibility appears exaggerated at times and underestimated at others. Today, we will assess what is now considered an imminent ISIS threat, look into the areas within the Lebanese fabric that embrace Sharia law. We will also try to determine whether the Islamic State is a byproduct of the West or, as some may argue, a reinterpretation of some branches in Islam. But what is most important is to look into the Lebanese current socio-political situation in the absence of a president and look into security matters that would make Lebanon less or more immune to the imminent threat. Let me first welcome our guest here at the studio, Dr. Mohammed Haidar. Welcome back. And before we delve into our discussions, let's have a look at this brief report on recent developments in Lebanon.
On September 6, Islamic State gunmen decimated the news that they had beheaded a Lebanese soldier they were holding captive. During weeks of indirect negotiations between IS and Lebanese authorities, the gunmen demanded the release of more than 400 Islamists from Lebanese prisons. Most of the imprisoned Islamists are accused of committing terrorist acts. In a move to pressure Lebanese officials, IS gunmen beheaded a Sunni Lebanese soldier and threatened to kill others unless their demands were met. But on September 4th, the Lebanese cabinet rejected any direct negotiations with the kidnappers and also rejected any deal to swap or exchange imprisoned Islamists for the soldiers. Less than 48 hours after the cabinet decision, the gunmen distributed a photo of a second Lebanese soldier being beheaded, this time a Shiite. The kidnap and murder has sparked new tensions in Lebanon, including a backlash against Syrian refugees and a string of sectarian kidnappings. In the Bekaa Valley, tit-for-tat kidnappings have been taking place, with tents in informal camps being set alight and hundreds of Syrians fleeing for fear of attack. With such events, that reminds us of the pre-Civil War scenario. The Lebanese government may need to take action before it is too late.
Dr. Haidar, ISIS started its beheading in Lebanon. It targeted people in the Lebanese army. What is the intention given they did not target civilians?
First of all, we have to look at the whole situation in the Middle East, in the region, and what's happening. And then, partly we look at the role of ISIS in Lebanon. First of all, if you look at the background of ISIS, you have to go back to some of the fundamentalists, how they developed their thoughts and their philosophy and their strategies. So you have to go from Al-Qaeda first, the grassroots of these thoughts, where it started and who is fueling it and who is helping, for this idea to spread like fire, in the Middle East. So you go from Al-Qaeda to Al-Nusra and then to Daesh and then to ISIS. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that, what's happening in Lebanon is the reflection of what's happening in the whole Middle East at the moment. But there are many interlocking factors or variables are reacting together to bring the situation to Lebanon to such level of tension and conflict between, or to bring, Daesh to the Lebanese borders. And at the moment, we find partially a part of the Lebanese land is occupied by those terrorist organizations.
But back to the army, do you think there is a plan
Yes, I'm coming to the army.
Sure.
If you look at, for example, Iraq, the first institution has been targeted there by the American upon the occupation period of time. The Iraqi army was targeted, has been dismantled, everybody sent home, and they started a new army. The new army is incapable of protecting the country and let the country, reach to this stage of violence and turbulence. Look at, what happened in Egypt. The army is targeted, and there are many, military operations by Islamists, which is something really is very strange, to the conflict in Egypt. Look at what's happening in Syria. Okay, the whole regime is targeted, but the army was targeted first. Mm-hmm. But the question is, what the same purpose or the same ideology is being followed in Syria and Iraq and Egypt or Libya? No, it is not. The situation is completely different. Mm-hmm. And this shows that what is happening in Iraq is completely different than what might happen in Lebanon or what was happening in Egypt or Syria. In Iraq, the reason was, the sectarian situation. Mm-hmm. Some of the Sunni, after the Saddam Hussein regime, they thought they have been marginalized.
But what about Lebanon?
Yes, but what about the situation in Egypt? There is no Shia Sunnah. There is nothing, no such things like that.
So it's not sectarian.
Exactly. So Lebanon, because Lebanon was standing by, for example, the regime in Syria, and then it has to be punished by many countries involved in the area.
But who's
the
Lebanese
army in specific was not really, like an easy tool or an easy way to manipulate or to implement order on it or directed by one of the politicians or the political parties. So it started to be like a barrier or a constraint. So that's why, the army was involved in looking after the security of Lebanon. After the assassination of the Rafiq al-Hariri, yes, we know what happened to the Lebanese institution. The Lebanese institution has been, kidnapped and hijacked by the sectarian parties. So each department, each position has been, delegated or given to one of the political parties or the sectarian figures in Lebanon.
We'll get to that. Let me now welcome Dr. Mazen Mufarrej, humanitarian activist. Welcome to Straightforward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carl. Thank you.
You heard Dr. Haidar, but my question to you from a humanitarian perspective, how would you comment on the Lebanese attacking Syrian refugees who sought a safe haven in Lebanon?
Right. Well, unfortunately, some Syrian refugees have been given 48 hours to evacuate some villages over health problems or security concerns in what's called informal refugee camp, or else they will be held accountable. And 2 nights, like last night, some flyers were circulated also in some districts of Beirut asking Syrians to leave in retaliation to the ISIS beheading 2 captured soldiers. It's true that some Syrian refugees are making their way into the low skilled labor market and competing for local jobs. However, from a humanitarian perspective, this kind of behavior attacking innocent refugees is unacceptable, especially when some Lebanese started attacking those innocents who are seeking a safe haven, as you mentioned earlier, in Lebanon and have escaped the brutality of the Syrian regime.
And also from Lebanon, let's talk to Reverend Fadi Daw, Professor of Christian Theology, Interreligious Dialogue and Geopolitics of Religion. Welcome to Straightforward.
Thank you. Thank you.
As a consultant on Muslim-Christian relations, how would you explain the elements that led to the re-rise of Islamic fundamentalism?
Let me say this is a very complex question. And I would like also to distinguish between what we call Islamic fundamentalism in general, that can include different currents and movements under this title. And when we talk about ISIS, I will put it in another category, in fact. So just to clarify that this is not, from my perspective, it's not included ISIS, although there are some common reasons behind Islamic fundamentalism, or I would say terrorism, or terrorist groups like ISIS and
Can you elaborate on these common factors?
Yeah, very briefly. In fact, I will enumerate 4 main factors for the let me say this re-rise of Islamic fundamentalism, and in a way also in relation with kind of terrorist groups. The first one is the failure of the states in our region. In fact, During the so-called Arab Spring, we talked so much about the collapse of some regimes. But in fact, we forgot that we are facing even a more difficult problem in our region, which is the failure of states, not only regime. If I take the situation of Iraq, Syria also, and unfortunately, in a way, we can talk about Lebanon as a state under the risk of being a failure state also. So I think this is a major reason in the region that opens the space to such movements or to such groups, fundamentalist or terrorist groups. The second argument and reason for the rise of these movements would be the situation of injustice and misery in so many areas, and where in fact the social justice is almost totally forgotten.
But does it
society.
justify developing into acts of terrorism? Social injustice is common in Europe and other parts of the world.
Just let me clarify that nothing can justify any terrorist group or even extremely radical group, but it may explain the existence of such a group. So I think that, and let me add two other reasons from my perspective. One of them, the third one, would be the radical and sometimes ambiguous religious teachings coming from some spheres, especially when we talk about Islam, in relation with the weakness of the Islamic official institution in our region. In fact, we don't have strong religious institutions that can monitor and even guide the Islamic discourse in the region. And this also is a gap that can give an opportunity for such movements also to fill it and to pretend that they are representing also the real Islam.
In the case of Lebanon, are you talking here about the institutions, for example, Dar al-Fatwa, that could do something about it?
Sure. I think all the Islamic institutions in the region are today challenged by this situation. And in fact, maybe the main now challenge and crisis is inside Islamic institutions, how to respond to such a situation. But again, let me make a difference between what we can call political Islam or fundamentalist political Muslim Islamic movements, let's say non-violent movements, and the violent groups and movements and then the terrorist ones. Unfortunately, most of the efforts are being done by the Islamic official institutions to face the political Islam. If I take the example of Egypt, for example, or Lebanon or other similar countries, we see that there are huge efforts that being put to face political Islam and in fact to ensure the legitimacy of representing Islam. But they are forgotten, in fact, to face what is more dangerous also than political Islam, which is radical Islam, terrorist Islamic movements. I can understand that this can be overwhelming for the current official institutions, and I can also imagine that they don't have all the means and the capacities to face such a situation, very dangerous and a huge challenge.
Stay with us, Reverend Professor Dow. Yes. Let's get back to Lebanon and terror in Lebanon with Dr. Haidar. Tell us more, Dr. Haidar, about the micro-geopolitics in the Bekaa region, East Lebanon, where terrorists from Syria's al-Nusra Front sought refuge. Tell us more about the situation, especially in Arsal, when Hezbollah is supposedly to have the Bekaa as its stronghold in the region. Why did Hezbollah downplay the role of ISIS as it's still doing so now, especially pursuant to its meeting with General Aoun?
May I go back to the point, where our father, just elaborated, mainly on the reason of this,
briefly,
fundamentalist. Sure. Briefly, there are four major factors, I think. One of them is the failure of the political regimes and the dictatorships in the Arab world. Second, the lack of political and economic development. And you have the sequence failures at loss of wars against Israel. And then the rise of a new philosophy or new wave of resistance in the Middle East, again the Israelis, And we've seen that Lebanon has achieved, victory against the Israelis and put preventive measures against them. And then this led to a very difficult situation and confusion in the Middle East. In the midst of that, someone who is desperate to live a decent life in the Arab world, which led to all this conflict. And then somebody came and took in control the whole situation, and they played the sectarian role between, for example, Shia and Sunni, Muslim and Christian, and then the whole situation exploded like that. This is just there. Okay, going back, to Lebanon. In Lebanon, we should realize that we don't have like a grassroots of a fundamental ideas and fundamental. But there were many countries who wanted to explore the whole situation in Lebanon. So they start to play this game, the sectarian game, dividing the Lebanese and trying to control some of the Lebanese. And their excuse is those are Muslim Sunnah or those are Muslim Shia and those are Christian. Under this category, then you have to remember that we came out of a war for about 25 years, and the whole situation was still vulnerable. Everything is weak. We have a very weak social structure. We have a lack of economic development. We have a big gap of like a black hole in the finance, mainly in the government. And this has affected the whole situation in the country, which allowed some of the Lebanese to adapt such ideas in order to show maybe their anger. But this group should not represent Lebanon. However, because of the situation in Syria, they found Arsal is the weak point on the borders, and they wanted really to make more than that in Arsal.
But
because it's a pocket connected geographically and strategically to whoever is fighting against the regime in Syria. And they tried that on the northern border, near Tripoli, near Akkar, Al-Qsair and Al-Hermel, and then they couldn't succeed there. And then they succeeded in Arsal.
How did that happen with Hezbollah being very close to Arsal?
The point here is not Hezbollah, not the Lebanese army, not this group, not that group. The whole Lebanese, they should have been aware of all this development, in our neighborlands. And they should have realized that. Although, many, and I remember, the Minister of Defense, he warned the Lebanese, and he told them, look, there are people who are ready, and there are sleeping cells who are ready to act like this in Lebanon, and we have to take serious measures. But because of the because of the conflict in Lebanon, some of the parties, they were not supporting the Lebanese army. They did not give him the authority, and the Prime Minister as well could not give a clear authority for the Lebanese army to take serious action, and they halted them, and they couldn't implement a military plan or a security plan against those people.
Back to Dr. Mufarrish, Syrian refugees are in Lebanon to seek shelter. They hope to return back to Syria while peace is restored. But meanwhile, do you think their limited access to resources within camps and outside them might lead them to empathize with ISIS, if not perhaps radicalize and join ISIS even?
Well, it's a very valid question, actually. Recently, the United Nations estimates that there are almost about 1.2, 1.5 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon alone. To combine this with existing population of nearly 100,000 Iraqis and nearly 500,000 Palestinian refugees. So really this means that there are now close to 2.5 million refugees in Lebanon, a country that normally has a population below 5 million. So the question is, what happens when just under nearly half of the Lebanese population has little or no legal rights and poor access to legal protection and no ability to vote or participate in the democratic process. So while really nobody can predict whether a refugee group like this will remain calm or not, the longer this enormous Syrian refugee population remains in flux in Lebanon, the more explosive the mix, and that's certain. And unfortunately, probably we will witness some more complications in Lebanon. And furthermore, to add fuel to this fire, the world is really tired of financing humanitarian assistance to Syrian refugees. And if you come across the recent publications by the United Nations that was issued August 31st of this year, the United Nations has only received a third of the 1.5 billion needed in 2014 for life supporting services to the Syrian refugees. Mm-hmm. More importantly, though, there is simply no plan of what to do with such an enormous refugee population. Needless to say that the U.S. Takes as many as 80,000 refugees each year, and the global appetite to absorb refugees is facing really stiff resistance.
Do you agree, Dr. Haidar?
It's really quite reasonable for
generally speaking, the refugee situation is, this issue itself, it needs a lot of effort and collaboration from the whole, community in Lebanon, first of all, and other government in the region, and the United Nations institutions. Lebanon itself cannot, bear this cost. First of all, there will be definitely, this year will be a humanitarian disaster, for
and
the
this is why I'm asking, would that cause factions or members within these groups to radicalize?
There are a lot of people who might be like sleeping cells and using all of this refugees camp. And it proved that, Arsal proved, if this happened in Arsal, we have to remember there are many refugee camps inside Lebanon, and who can guarantee that there are no 5 or 10 or 15, a group of, for example, a cell of a group of 15 persons in this camp or that camp, and they can coordinate and collaborate at the same time, and they go and make the troubles for the Lebanese, and then the whole situation will explode, and there will be no control from the Lebanese, point of view against those refugees camp. You see, no, even the government will not be able to control if any of the Lebanese army members, for example, killed in this brutal way, then there will be a lot of consequences. And the Lebanese government must take the steps, the necessary steps to prevent this. And they should, all the politicians, they should be ready to give a concession and authority to the Lebanese army to take every necessary measures to protect the Lebanese land from whoever is trying to do it.
Dr. Faraj, as a humanitarian activist and a Lebanese citizen, of course, how would you advise, or how would you even address ISIS yourself, be it the abductors of the Lebanese soldiers or the leadership of ISIS? How would you advise, communicate with them to stay out of Lebanon?
Well, Lebanon is actually in grave danger of becoming the next ISIS victim.
Why would you say so?
Recent clashes in Arsal were just a taste of things to come, unfortunately. So we don't know what the future holds for us. And furthermore, as we mentioned earlier, there are more than 1 million Syrian refugees currently living in Lebanon.
Yes, but how would you? What's in your opinion would be the best peaceful way to result in ISIS staying out of Lebanon?
Well, to be honest, I don't know whether a peaceful resolution could be reached with such a group.
What are the alternatives then?
Well, it's simply short-sighted and irresponsible to think that a country like Lebanon can be left to its own devices to deal with such a problem. This is a global threat to international peace, and things need to be done so fast, and the international community has to take a fast action. Otherwise, Lebanon and the whole region will be victims of such terrorist organizations.
Dr. Mazen Mufaraj, also MD, joined us live from Beirut. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Back to Reverend Professor Dow. What is it about Christianity that causes the Islamic State to target Christians?
Yeah, I don't think that the Islamic State are targeting only Christians, but true that Christians, mainly in Iraq, until now suffered. From the situation very much, and with more than 150,000 displaced people from their own homes and villages. So why this? I will say because Christianity very simply represents the other vis-a-vis this radical group. And unfortunately, such radical and terrorist group, they will look for what is different to attack it, and to pretend by attacking anything that is not complying with their ideology and even with their perception of being, I would say, believer from their perspective. So they pretend, or they think they will gain legitimacy inside the Muslim community by doing that. But I don't think that we can. Attacking Christians and attacking Yazidis, for example, in Iraq, is of course, showing the dangerous possibilities and potentialities that are existing with this, so-called Islamic States or ISIS.
And Professor Dow, while some suggest that Al-Qaeda and ISIS are a creation of foreign powers, could one argue that they are the product of a varied interpretation or varied branch in Islam? And I would like also Dr. Haidar to interject on that later.
I won't agree with either, the conspiracy theory saying that ISIS or similar group are the creation of foreign powers or Western powers, for example.
Why are you so sure about that?
I'm so sure because facts are showing us that and when you do some analysis, you can see that there is no interest for example, Western.
Is there no interest that Arab armies are weakened, especially with Israel being around their borders, for instance?
Sure, this is one possible interest, but I don't think this is important enough and secure enough to be the reason of creating groups like such ISIS by Western forces. What I was saying before, that some Western countries and especially I would say the double standards in politics, in the Western politics and international politics, are for sure encouraging the existence of such groups, but they are not creating them. And also, I don't agree with the idea that ISIS is one of the interpretations.
Dr. Haidar will interject on that.
Well, yeah. I hope our father is not get mixed up, between what the West as Christian people would like, or how would like to deal with the Christian of the Middle East,
which
or their politicians,
which is not
their politicians are not really interested in the Christianity at all in the Middle East. A Christian has been humiliated in Jerusalem, in Palestine, which is the cradle of the Christianity, and none of the Western, showed any interest in helping those Christians. On the contrary, they helped the Israeli to evacuate Palestine from the Christian, which is the cradle of Christianity. For us as the Muslims, in the Middle East and in Lebanon, we have to realize that this land is for all the people, has been, on this land since the history of this land. Lebanon is our destiny. Lebanon is our country with its mosaic structure. Muslim, Christian, Jews, whoever was on this land. This is our land and this is our last resort. But we have to be aware of what is really planned for this. Why the West was not really interested in the Christians in Iraq. They saw that the Iraqi, been humiliated for over 2.5 years by those fundamentalist group. None of the countries, of the Western countries, showed any interest or mercy or objected what's happening. They've seen that, in Egypt as well.
But back to my question, Dr. Haidar.
And this is what happened in Syria.
Yes.
And no one has objected. Only when it came to this journalist, one journalist compared to hundreds of thousands, then the West started to be concerned. What a hypocrisy, you know. This is not Christianity.
But back to Islam,
Allow me to be
about the branches and sub-branches of Islam. Do you think there are loopholes in Islam or in the interpretation of Islam that could cause fundamentalism to be on the rise?
There might be fundamentalists all over the world in a different shape of
but we're
ideology.
talking about Islam. We're talking
exactly.
About Islam.
In Islam, there is no such idea or ideologies.
Yes.
This ideology is created by human being. It has nothing to do or represent Islam itself. Islam itself is the religion of peace.
Just like U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said, it's un-Islamic. Whatever's happening today.
This is used by some of the Muslims to justify what they are doing.
Abused even.
Yes.
Back to Reverend Professor Dow. Tell us more about the Maronite Church very briefly and its stance on this when it comes to protecting itself and its followers in Lebanon.
Yeah, but before, allow me to comment on Mr. Haidar's remark. Yeah, just very briefly to say that I'm an Arab Christian, and I'm totally aware that, in fact, my presence in this Middle East and in this Arab world is part of the Arab civilizations, and I'm not expecting at all from any Western country or international community to defend Christians. But what I'm looking for is that not to have double standards in the international politics, and to ask all, international community to defend any innocent people who are, in fact, under unjust and unfair situation, like what's happening, either in Syria or in Iraq, regardless if the people are Christian or Muslim or having any affiliation. And to talk about the Maronite Church and its position now, let me say that the Maronite Patriarch, Bishara Rai, is taking, a leading role now in this at this moment. He's currently, in fact, in the United States now, taking part to an international conference for the, under the title "The Defense of Christians in the Middle East." Although, in fact, the statement of the Maronite Church is not at all to defend Maronites or Christians, is to seek for countries and situations where all citizens can enjoy, in fact, peace and their own rights in these countries. So the position of the Maronite Church is, in fact, to call the international community to take its responsibility, because let's acknowledge it, some of our countries are unable now, and our governments unable to deal with the situation. And let me also add that when we ask the question if the Western countries, some Western countries have the interest to create groups like ISIS, why don't we not ask also that some of Arab regimes also have an interest to create such groups also?
Reverend Professor Fadi Daw, also chairman of Adyan, a Lebanese foundation for interreligious studies and spiritual solidarity. Many thanks for sharing your views.
Thank you.
Saudi Arabia has provided Lebanon's army battling jihadists on the Syrian border with $1 billion to strengthen security. Saudi Arabia is already financing a $3 billion package of French military equipment and arms for Lebanon's army. And following the recent official visit to France of Prince Salman of Saudi Arabia, which did tackle arms contracts, including weapons, they were discussed face-to-face, but no official statement has referred to the arms deal regarding the French equipment purchased by Saudi for the Lebanese army. Now, internally, Lebanon's presidential vacuum and it persists, and former Premier Saad al-Hariri returns to Beirut after a long time. General Aoun visits Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, arguing that the key to elect a president in Lebanon is in Hezbollah's hands. And Dr. Haidar, why are things still pending? The Lebanese army has done its part, choosing weapons. Prince Salman and President Hollande met face-to-face, and still the arming of the Lebanese army did not take place.
Those people are lying to the Lebanese, as simple as that. Since when this initiative has been given, by Saudi Arabia to the Lebanese, on the Lebanese army? They said there is a gift of $3 billion in arm deal will be given to the Lebanese. How long this will take? It's been over a year now, and nothing is maturing, Nothing is materializing, and nothing arrived to Lebanon. I have seen some hammers, have been given, to the Lebanese army, and some hand grenades. If I collect some money, yourself and myself, or run a television ad and say we're collecting some money or funding for the Lebanese army, in one day we can collect enough or 10 times what has arrived already to the Lebanese army. So there are people who do not like to see the Lebanese army strong, including some of the Lebanese themselves. There are some politicians, and unfortunately they are known to the Lebanese. They are trying to weaken the Lebanese army.
Who are these politicians?
There are
Can you name two?
well, they are known, all the names.
I don't
all
know
the
them.
No, there are hundreds of them, I'm telling you. Some, at least I can name 10 politicians who do not like to see the Lebanese army as strong. Because if the Lebanese army is strong, he will be able to control the situation in Tripoli. And if the Lebanese army, control the situation in Tripoli, there will be no more voices, coming, out of the folk, to say whatever, or they sing their own song. We would like to see the Lebanese army not even as strong as Hezbollah. We would like to see the Lebanese army the strongest power in Lebanon to protect the Lebanese lands. Now,
But can we compare the army to a militia?
No, that's what I'm saying. We should have a strategy in Lebanon in order not to lead us to a situation like that. If we have a strong Lebanese army, we don't need all these militias.
Back to Saudi.
If we arm the Lebanese army with strategic weapons, then he will be capable of protecting our lands from any aggressor, Now, who will be able, to control all these, at the borders? If the Israeli tomorrow attacked Lebanon, what we will tell the Lebanese army? Just look at them, and we get, our family members killed with the most sophisticated weapons. Is this how we protect the country?
Back to Saudi Arabia, Dr. Haidar, how would you comment on the style of the recent Saudi $1 billion support to the army in Lebanon, given it was announced by former Premier Saad al-Hariri?
Yeah,
not Saudi Arabia even.
First of all, instead of giving the money, for the Lebanese army, he compensated the people who attacked the Lebanese army in Arsal. He gave them $15 million straight away, and God knows how much he gave them behind the table. First of all, instead of giving this money to the Lebanese army who is protecting us, he was compensating this money to those who committed the crime against the Lebanese army. About 10 members of the Lebanese army has been killed, by the people in Arsal. I'm not pointing at anyone, but the Lebanese army knows who killed them. Those officers who killed, 1 year ago, they were alive in Arsal. Why the Lebanese army could not protect them? Because no one has given him the power and the authority to implement his military plan. When we say security military plan, not to be implemented by the politician, you go and do like a check blockade block area here, and don't do that.
But these are fellow Lebanese in Arsal. These are
the
fellow
Lebanese
Lebanese.
army,
Would the army target its fellow
the previous
Lebanese?
cabinet did not allow the Lebanese army to approach even Arsal. He said, you as the Lebanese army have to stay out of Arsal. They know. Some of the MPs, they went to Arsal and supported all those military there. They have given them the opportunity for this Daesh and ISIS to come to our land. If they haven't given them this excuse, why then now they did not support the Lebanese army against his attack against those people?
But if
none of them, spoke one word, but they were clever in criticizing the Lebanese army all the time.
I hear you, but then there are no-go areas for the Lebanese army elsewhere in Lebanon, not particularly Arsal, and maybe that opened the door for the same to occur in Arsal. I'm talking here about Nahr al-Barid, camps of Palestinians, where it's supposedly...
And who helped all of those people in Nahr al-Barid as well? Were not they the Lebanese politician?
But
who
the
helped
army
them,
does
to
not-
run away, through their own people, through the security forces? Who let all those leaders, of those criminals? And then the Lebanese army, he put his hand, captured them and put them in prison. And now some of the Lebanese politicians, they want the Lebanese army to release those people who committed crime against you. You have to remember, there were 120 martyred from the Lebanese army in Nahr al-Bared, and there are many, are falling every day.
Can we blame this on the politicizing of the Lebanese army, as you said, by pressures on the Lebanese army?
It's not, the Lebanese army is not politicized.
But there is pressure.
There were some, some pressure from politicians to drive the army, beyond, their control.
And let's talk here about the army chief, be it the current army chief or the previous one, which was President Michel Sleiman. Do you think they are under pressure also from pointing their weapons against their fellow Lebanese, especially when they know that this will come down bad on their legacy, especially that they have presidential aspirations with the constitution being amended all the time?
The Lebanese army has a wise, leadership. His commander, even the previous commanders before, they were wise enough to keep the whole situation balanced in terms of the weight of the army, which we could put here and there. The Lebanese army did not play or did not raise the rifle against any of those people.
Let's talk now.
He kept it balanced between all of them.
Let's talk now to London-based Mideast political expert Ja'far Al-Ahmar. Welcome on Straightforward.
Okay.
The town of Arsal in East Lebanon has been a stronghold again for radicalists, be it al-Nusra or Daesh, which is the ISIS. How, in your opinion, did that happen?
As you know, the adjacent border between Syria and Lebanon stretches to more than 365 kilometers. Many of this area are mountains, caves, and it's an ideal hub for fighters, Syrian fighters who fled the areas from Qusayr, Al-Qalamun, and the countryside of Damascus. As you know, there is an enclave in eastern Beqa Valley called Arsal. That enclave, it formed an ideal hub as well for the Syrian fighters who sympathized with them, and finally these fighters took over. This enclave has a sensitivity because it's mainly dominated Sunni Muslims, whereas the other neighbors, all the neighbors of this enclave are Shiite, and they are sensitive not to take any action which be understood as sectarian.
Yes, Mr. Al-Ahmar, could Hezbollah being not far from Arsal, could they not have stopped the supply chain to Arsal from Daesh coming from Syria?
No, of course not. I mean, first of all, it's not his job to do it.
Can you explain it militarily? You say, of course not.
If you look at what's going on now in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia,
yes,
to the speech of last night of President Barack Obama, they are very much concerned about this terrorist groups, and they are trying to form an international coalition to fight it back. So you imagine, even the United States with this big military is seeking for an international coalition from the area, Arab countries, to come over and help to confront these terrorist groups. So it's not easy at all for any party alone to fight back, even if it's very, as you know, even if it is known for its well-trained, whatever. But these terrorist groups are a very big problem, which needs countries. And as Obama said,
yes. Stay with us, Mr. Al-Ahmar. Dr. Haidar would like to interject here.
Look, a serious step, from the international community, if they want to stop Daesh seriously, they have to drain, their sources of weapon and arms. If they don't do that, otherwise, who will do that? We know that the arms, ammunitions, manpower, all this technical support is coming through the Syrian borders. It's coming from Turkey in huge, big quantities.
Still now?
Until now, yes. It's coming through the Jordanian borders, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. All of this, who is fueling all the situation? Who is doing this? If those people who are meeting now in Jeddah, if they are not really serious, then I don't think this will happen. Taking in consideration that Saudi Arabia is still saying now I'm opening training camps, for
Yes.
the Jabhat al-Nusra in Saudi Arabia to fight against the Syrian regime. You can't have this double standard.
Yes.
All the Nusra groups and all these little faction groups, they are joining Daesh because the moment they stop giving them ammunition and supply, they are joining Daesh. They don't care about Saudi Arabia. And then they will turn back
Yes.
to
But
their country.
Speaking of support, let's get back very briefly to Saudi support of the Lebanese army, especially vis-à-vis Saad al-Hariri's return to Lebanon after a long time. I've spoken to radical ISIS supporters before on other shows, and they're not keen at all on the Hariri, on Saad al-Hariri, even though he is a fellow Sunni. How can you comment on his return, especially now with the rising threat?
Privately speaking, no,
Yes.
there were some talks that one of the main purposes for his return
Yes.
is to release some of the Saudi figures from the Lebanese prison, and that's why he came with this 1 billion. This is a sure information.
It's not conspiracy.
It's
true.
not conspiracy at all. There were some really important figures in the Lebanese prisons, and he wanted to release them, and he
And-
might succeed.
And from London, we are also joined by Kataib, or Lebanese Phalange Party member Christian Shawoul. Thank you very much for being on Straightforward again.
Hello.
In light of the recent events in Lebanon, we've seen General Michel Aoun visit Hezbollah Secretary General Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. What are your comments on the visit and the main objectives of this visit, in your opinion?
Basically, Aoun's visit to Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah have nothing to do with the conflict that Lebanon is facing against ISIS terrorist group and the terrorism in general. The visit came purely after few Lebanese newspapers reported that Hezbollah don't have any problem in meeting halfway through 14 March coalition and agreeing on a neutral president. Based on that, General Michel Aoun decided to go and meet Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. And to prove my point right, after the meeting, sources from the Free Patriotic Movement reported to the newspapers that during that meeting, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah assured Aoun that he's the only candidate for the Hezbollah.
But do you think General Aoun, his top priority now is to become president, especially within the main security issues that the country is facing? Don't you think he went there for a political or military even strategy to be discussed with Hezbollah?
Aoun's main priority is to become president. He doesn't care about anything else for the time being, apart from him becoming and being elected as president. Yes. He will happily leave Lebanon without a president. He wouldn't step down as a candidate, even for 10 years. He wouldn't until he becomes
Mr. Al-Ahmar, do you agree with Mr. Christian Shawoul?
I couldn't hear probably because the sound was very low.
Yes, Mr. Shawoul argues that General Michel Aoun, his main objective in his Hezbollah visit recently with Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah is about becoming president and getting the approval from or even the support of Hezbollah chief. Do you agree with Mr. Shawoul?
To take approval from Hezbollah to support him?
To get support from Hezbollah rather than maybe discuss the security situation in Lebanon with the ISIS threat?
I don't think that the visit was for this reason. I mean, Michel Aoun, he already enjoys the support of Hezbollah regarding his presidency as a candidate. It's already known for everyone. Probably they discussed more serious issues rather than this one. The coming elections, probably they discussed it. I think they discussed also the concerns of the extremism and fanatism which is spreading from Syria and Iraq towards Lebanon. I think these are the two main serious issues which concern the two leaders in the meeting recently.
Yes, Dr. Haidar, the political affinity between Hezbollah and the Free Patriotic Movement has been established since the meeting in Mar Mikhael a couple of years back. Yet, despite the arguments that it's not about becoming president, what are the chances now after the visit of General Aoun becoming president?
It's not, whether General Aoun wanted to be a president,
sure,
or he care or he doesn't care.
But
what if the same idea has been, given to Amin Ismail? Say, look, would like to be a president. You think he will turn it down? He will not. It's a matter of a principle all the time. What's happening between General Aoun and Nasrallah
as of
is
2007.
A matter of a principle. Yes. No, it's a matter of principle. They are thinking ahead. What is the destination? What is the future of this community? But from the Kataib representative, if he say General Aoun is only interested in that, will be a naive idea.
We respect every opinion, just like we respect yours, of course.
No, that's fine. I mean, look, from a democratic point of view, we have to let democracy take place in Lebanon.
Yes, but answer my question. What are the chances now after the visit with Hezbollah chief?
Look, it's not the chances whether he succeeds or not.
But Hezbollah has a say in Lebanon.
I know that he has a say in Lebanon. In fact, that was not, Hezbollah stepped forward to stop this presidency election to happen. It was al-Mustaqbal and the 14th of March who put, an impossible candidate. That's what has led the situation.
Answer my question.
Yeah. No, there might be a chance. Look, it depends on what will happen, in the coming 3-4 weeks. And then, we might see this happening. But in the near future, in the light of this situation, I think, we will stay without a president for more than a year. And I hope this doesn't happen.
You're probably relating it to the regional issues.
This is what's happening.
Particularly Syria.
Because somebody regional interfered in this election,
or not
Saudi
interfere.
Arabia. No, Saudi Arabia interfered, and they announced it formally that Jaja is their candidate. Imagine that, because of this.
Who's Hezbollah's candidate? Clearly.
Who's Hezbollah candidate? I think if the Christian agreed, and don't tell me there is no. Forget about Aoun at the moment. Are you telling me there is no real candidate among the Christian who deserve to be the Lebanese president, who might have the agreement of all these parties?
That's between brackets.
There are hundreds of them.
Let's get back to ISIS. Of course, we wanted to touch a little bit on the Lebanese presidency. Mr. Shawoul, some argue that there are right-winged Christian parties in Lebanon that are armed and ready to confront ISIS or similar form of terror. Which is more effective, though, a military or political settlement, in your opinion?
A political settlement led by the Lebanese government and the Lebanese officials only is always the better choice. However, it doesn't take the right of the Lebanese people to defend their existence and their dignity and their belief if terrorism knocks at their doorsteps.
And Christian, we've seen the Phalange Party stand in solidarity with the Christians in Al-Mosul in Iraq, in a sit-in Beirut, even before the Patriarch's visit with the other bishops to Erbil. We've also seen a lot of laissez-faire from the West during the eradication of the Christians of Al-Mosul. Back to Lebanon, in your opinion, will the West have a different stance when it comes to the Christians of Lebanon? Should they face the destiny of Iraq's Christians?
It is not the first time that the Phalange Party show its support to the Christians of Mosul and the Christians of Iraq in general, as well as the sit-in that we organized in central Beirut. The Lebanese Phalange Party as well gathered donations from clothes to money and food and helped all the Christians of Iraq that are in Lebanon and that needs help. On the political front as well, President Amin Ismail used all his tight contacts with the international free world and the international leaders to make them aware.
But are they aware? Are they aware and genuinely concerned? We've also seen since the days of President Sarkozy in France, he told Patriarch Rai that the Christians are not numerous and they could come to France, which really sort of angered Patriarch Rai. And from the doorstep of the Élysée Palace, he said that he spoke about strategic alliance with the resistance, meaning Hezbollah from the Elysee. So yes, it's good to get support from the West and to lobby for that, to protect the Christians, but how effective is this?
We as Lebanese Christians have never relied on the West to help us or not.
Not at all?
From the Ottoman Empire.
Not at all, historically.
Well, at the beginning, no, because if you remember, I'll take you back to the Ottoman empires. We relied on ourselves.
Can you remind him?
Just a second, Mr.
Can you remind him, with the American, invasion of Lebanon in the 50s? What the Americans
at the times of President Camille Chamoun.
During the
that was an invitation from President Chamoun.
Okay, invitation, but invitation for what? For protection.
Yes,
right.
It was effective at least.
And then we invited the Syrian and the Lebanese League to come and protect the Christians.
But today,
let me say one thing. We don't like to see at Lebanese, and I'm as a Muslim Lebanese, I don't like to see the Christian Lebanese in my country humiliated. I don't want to see him. He is under the mercy of other, powers from outside Lebanon. As exactly, I don't like to see any protection for myself in my country. We should be united as Lebanese to protect ourselves and to stand side by side against all of those to keep Lebanon for us as it used to be forever.
But sometimes the balance of power is disproportionate. Even Israel relies on foreign support when needed. So is it really humiliating to get support from foreign powers?
It is humiliating, yes. Why should we? Why? As Lebanese, we should have the Lebanese army protecting us. This is our priority. South Lebanon, they've been struggling for years and years to get protection from the Lebanese government against the Israeli, and they never get it. Why shouldn't we get this from Lebanon?
The Lebanese army to defend Lebanon. Would you agree on Hezbollah giving all its weapon to the Lebanese army to defend Lebanon?
If the Lebanese army is capable of defending the Lebanese land, the Hezbollah themselves, they will lay down their weapons. Believe me. It seemed, I'll tell you what, you have to go back to history and read it.
Lebanon in Arsal, and they proved how they can defend Lebanon in Nahr al-Barid, and they proved so many times, and they gave so many of their soldiers life as
and who gave the support for the Lebanese army in Nahr al-Barid?
You cannot contradict
the Syrians, you know
that.
The Syrians gave the ammunition and the weapons for the Lebanese army. We would love, look, since the 40s and the 50s, the Lebanese land has been humiliated by the Israelis.
One at a time, please.
And no support has been given to the Lebanese army to support the Lebanese land or protect the Lebanese land. All these years we've seen humiliation and thousands of attacks, from the Israelis. And we feel sorry for the Lebanese army for incapable and unable to protect our land.
One last word, Mr. Shaul, one last word very briefly.
Okay. Back to your original questions, and then I'll comment on Dr. Haider's comment. Us, as Lebanese Christians, we never relied on the West to start with. If you remember in 1975, all what the West and America came up with as a solution is the Henry Kissinger. The Henry Kissinger plan was to deport all the Christians to America and France and Canada or whatever, and to give us as Christians the laissez-passer or passport or, and basically to empty Lebanon from the Christians. We decided to stay by ourselves without the support of the West. We defended our land, our dignity, and our beliefs.
Who?
And we stayed in Lebanon.
Against who?
Now these days against ISIS.
Against who? Against who you?
Against
the American?
Against the people who came. Sorry, let me tell you against who? Against the people who came and said the road of Palestine starts from Junia and passing by Ayun al-Sijah.
You're talking about late President Palestinian.
You are talking about the Palestinians.
Yes.
Listen to me, Shaul. Mr. Shaul. You are talking about the Palestinians who really took advantage of their weapons and system, which really, as Lebanese ourselves, suffered from them as well in the south of Lebanon, more than you suffered yourself.
Yeah,
you suffered later on.
Let's not get back to the Civil War time, because that's a page that we would like to turn.
At the end of the point,
Mr. Shaul,
I would love to see the Lebanese army protecting
Yes,
me, not
Dr.
any other faction, even Hezbollah or Amal or any group. I would love to see the Lebanese army, you know, raising his flag and protecting all the Lebanese.
Why don't you give?
Miss-
Why don't you, as Hezbollah and Amal, give
Hezbollah
your weapon
and
to the
Amal
Lebanese
now, they
army?
are- they
Why
are-
you want to
these
help
are
the Lebanese
new.
army whenever it feels you, and whenever it comes, whenever it's concerning the Hezbollah weapon, all of a sudden
Yes,
you
No,
say
no,
the
no, no.
Lebanese army
When
is
we
not
find-
capable.
when we
But on
find
top of this, you
alternatives-
Can I
say the
talk,
Lebanese
please?
army
Please,
is
can I talk?
capable.
Because we don't
This
have
is a
time.
humiliating
Mr.
to
Shawoul,
the
back to
Lebanese
my
army.
question
You
as a
guys are
final
bringing
word. Do you
shame
think
to
the West
Lebanese
will be
army.
effective in its support to the Lebanese Christians if they were threatened by ISIS? Very briefly.
No, wait a minute. I have one word. Mr. Shawoul, do not be sensitive about the weapons of Hezbollah. They are protecting you and me now.
Okay,
You
fine
have to
then.
realize that.
Back to my
Otherwise,
question.
Daesh will be, you know, on the step door, on the doorstep of yours and everybody in Kasserwan and all this area.
Of course, in joint efforts with the Lebanese
Of
army.
course,
as
no.
they said.
Priority for the Lebanese
Definitely.
army.
Christian,
Priority.
Christian, what
Sorry,
about the
Carl,
West? Very briefly.
Can I just say something very
Yes.
quickly, please? Because of Hezbollah intervention in Syria, ISIS came to Lebanon. Because of Hezbollah, there is kidnapped soldiers
Yes,
in Syria
yes.
now. Hezbollah
You're-
takes full responsibility.
I hope,
Hezbollah is
I mean, if
bringing
you do not
terrorism
say
to
something
Lebanon.
else tomorrow, you know,
I see where you're
like
coming
Jean
from.
Blat, you know.
That was London-based Christian Shawoul of the Lebanese or Qatar Party. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Back to Mr. Al-Ahmar, can you comment a little bit? What are your thoughts? What is the best way now to confront ISIS politically first rather than militarily?
As Mr. Haidar has said, I mean, ISIS cannot be confronted only militarily, as the United States is doing now with this international coalition. It has to be confronted by closing the borders against the fighters who are pouring through Turkey, which Turkey is now a member of this international coalition. I mean, this also poses some doubt about how genuine they are to fight really ISIS. I mean, also the money which is poured
Yes.
to ISIS from various
And
countries in the Middle East.
my last question, Mr. Al-Ahmar, what do you think of Hezbollah's reaction and what do you think its reaction is? Now they seem to downplay the threat of the ISIS. They don't take it very seriously. Do you think it's because of their military capabilities, or do you think they just think the threat is not very imminent? It's not really a red alert?
It's not true that they don't take it seriously. They take it seriously, but the most important point that this mission is a very big mission which everyone who is concerned about the dangers of ISIS should cooperate to confront it. As I said, look what the Americans are doing now in the Middle East. They are trying to form international coalition. So it's not a mission of a party, no matter how well trained.
Yes. The reason why I asked my question is because some media argues that Hezbollah downplays the threat of the ISIS. It's not me asserting that. Of course, we do know that they sort of take it seriously, but I'm talking about some media saying that. And thank you very much, Jafar Al-Ahmar, London-based journalist and political analyst. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Pleasure.
My last question, Dr. Haidar. Some argue that Lebanon is strong in its political representation, which represents all sects, while others suggest that it promotes sectarianism. Some even call for a secular state. Do you agree that we have a predisposition in our political fabric that attracts sectarianism and sectarian tensions, or even in today's case, foreign sectarian-based violence like the one of the ISIS?
I think the sectarian system in Lebanon is really killing the Lebanese society.
Do you agree that for
this sectarianism, you know,
Do you
we should not, you know, advertise for it. We have to play a different role, you know, in Lebanon.
Do you support the sectarian state?
Well,
as a Muslim even.
And no, this is true. You know, this Lebanon is like a mosaic. And the beauty of this mosaic, when it has different colors and different thoughts. The Christian existed in Lebanon before the Muslims. So this is their land. And then we came as Muslims. So we have legitimate reason for being together. And we have to try, both of us, to keep this kind of mosaic, to give this this beauty of the.
But to keep the sectarian representation or go
it's
for
not
a
the
secular
sectarian
state?
representation. We have to get out of that. We have to realize there is a human dignity. At the end of the road, we have to serve people. Now the Lebanese parties, frankly speaking, are not helping Lebanon. They are helping themselves. Because of the sectarian situation, because of the issues, because of this belong to this ta'ifa or this group or this political
sense of nationalism
group.
You're talking is related
we
to their
have
sects.
to unite. We have to unite under any formula, which is really bring us all together. Our personal matter, whether I go to this Shia is a religious court or the Sunni court, this is something personal. We should really have to stay like that, which is really good, for the Lebanese to manage their. And the civil law, is for everyone. Nobody is, we have the beauty of this combination all together. And I hope on the top of this combination comes the Lebanese army, first of all. And because we born in the arm of the Lebanese army. There's no one single house, no one single family in the whole Lebanon do not have one member in its security, in the security system. Whether, in the internal security or the general security, al-Amn al-Aam, al-Darag, or the Lebanese army, all of us in this spot, and we have to protect it.
As we come to the end of our show today, I'd like to thank my guests, Dr. Mazen Mufarraj, Reverend Professor Fadi Daw, Mr. Jafar Al-Ahmar, and Mr. Christian Shawoul, and of course our studio guest, Dr. Muhammad Haidar. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. And whether voluntarily or by force, there has been a return to the monster known as fanaticism, and death has become a spectacle. Only time will tell whether the Lebanese will stand united facing the threat of terrorism. Stay tuned, I'll be with you again soon on Straightforward.
And then to ISIS. Everybody knows that, what's happening in Lebanon is the reflection of what's happening in the whole Middle East at the moment. But there are many interlocking factors or variables are reacting together to bring the situation to Lebanon to such level of tension and conflict between, or to bring, Daesh to the Lebanese borders. And at the moment, we find partially a part of the Lebanese land is occupied by those terrorist organizations.
But back to the army, do you think there is a plan
yes,
to
I'm coming to the army.
Sure.
If you look at, for example, Iraq, the first institution has been targeted there by the American upon the occupation period of time. The Iraqi army was targeted, has been dismantled, everybody sent home, and they started a new army. The new army is incapable of protecting the country and let the country, reach to this stage of violence and turbulence. Look at, what happened in Egypt. The army is targeted, and there are many, military operations by Islamists, which is something really is very strange, to the conflict in Egypt. Look at what's happening in Syria. Okay, the whole regime is targeted, but the army was targeted first. But the question is, what the same purpose, or the same ideology is being followed in Syria and Iraq and Egypt or Libya? No, it is not. The situation is completely different. And this shows that what is happening in Iraq is completely different than what might happen in Lebanon or what was happening in Egypt or Syria. In Iraq, the reason was, the sectarian situation. Some of
Hello, welcome back to Straightforward, your Middle East political debate show brought to you by Levant TV with me, Khalil Khawairi. Viewed from Lebanon, the expansion of the Islamic State in parts of Syria and Iraq over the past few months seemed to be a distant development. Viewed from the West, the very Islamic militants in Syria seemed to be the face of democracy in the Arab Spring. And following the Jeddah conference on fighting ISIS, Saudi Foreign Minister Saud al-Faisal condemned atrocities in the name of Islam. Meanwhile, John Kerry insists that ISIS terrorism is un-Islamic and President Obama is still for no boots on the ground. Back to Lebanon, everyone seems to be asking the same question: are they coming here? The possibility appears exaggerated at times and underestimated at others. Today, we will assess what is now considered an imminent ISIS threat, look into the areas within the Lebanese fabric that embrace Sharia law. We will also try to determine whether the Islamic State is a byproduct of the West or, as some may argue, a reinterpretation of some branches in Islam. But what is most important is to look into the Lebanese current socio-political situation in the absence of a president and look into security matters that would make Lebanon less or more immune to the imminent threat. Let me first welcome our guest here at the studio, Dr. Muhammad Haidar. Welcome back. And before we delve into our discussions, let's have a look at this brief report on recent developments in Lebanon.
On September 6, Islamic State gunmen decimated the news that they had beheaded a Lebanese soldier they were holding captive. During weeks of indirect negotiations between IS and Lebanese authorities, the gunmen demanded the release of more than 400 Islamists.
The Sunni, after the Saddam Hussein regime, they thought they had been marginalized.
But what about Lebanon?
Yes, no, but what about the situation in Egypt? There is no Shia Sunnah. There is nothing, no such thing
So
like
it's not
that.
sectarian.
Exactly. So Lebanon, because Lebanon was standing by, for example, the regime in Syria, and then it has to be punished by many countries involved in the area.
But who's the
Lebanese
beneficiary
army in specific was not really, like an easy tool or an easy way to manipulate or to implement order on it or directed by one of the politicians or the political parties. So it started to be like a barrier or a constraint. So that's why, the army was involved in looking after the security of of Lebanon. After the assassination of the Rafiq al-Hariri, we know what happened to the Lebanese institution. The Lebanese institution has been, kidnapped and hijacked by the sectarian parties. So each department, each position has been, delegated or given to one of the political parties or the sectarian figures in Lebanon.
We'll get to that. Let me now welcome Dr. Mazen Mufarrej, humanitarian activist. Welcome to Straightforward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carl. Thank you.
You heard Dr. Haidar, but my question to you from a humanitarian perspective, how would you comment on the Lebanese attacking Syrian refugees who sought a safe haven in Lebanon?
Right. Well, unfortunately, some Syrian refugees have been given 48 hours to evacuate some villages over health problems or security concerns in what's called informal refugee camp, or else they will...
From Lebanese prisons, most of the imprisoned Islamists are accused of committing terrorist acts. In a move to pressure Lebanese officials, IS gunmen beheaded a Sunni Lebanese soldier and threatened to kill others unless their demands were met. But on September 4th, the Lebanese cabinet rejected any direct negotiations with the kidnappers and also rejected any deal to swap or exchange imprisoned Islamists for the soldiers. Less than 48 hours after the cabinet decision, the gunmen distributed a photo of a second Lebanese soldier being beheaded, this time a Shiite. The kidnap and murder has sparked new tensions in Lebanon, including a backlash against Syrian refugees and a string of sectarian kidnappings. In the Bekaa Valley, tit-for-tat kidnappings have been taking place, with tents in informal camps being set alight and hundreds of Syrians fleeing for fear of attack. With such events, that reminds us of the pre-Civil War scenario. The Lebanese government may need to take action before it is too late.
Dr. Haidar, ISIS started its beheading in Lebanon. It targeted people in the Lebanese army. What is the intention given they did not target civilians?
First of all, we have to look at the whole situation in the Middle East, in the region, and what's happening. And then, partly we look at the role of ISIS in Lebanon. First of all, if you look at the background of ISIS, you have to go back to some of the fundamentalists how they develop their thoughts and their philosophy and their strategies. So you have to go from Al-Qaeda first, the grassroots of this thought, where it started and who is fueling it and who is helping, for this idea to spread like fire, in the Middle East. So you go from Al-Qaeda to Al-Nusra and then to Daesh.
Be held accountable. And two nights, like last night, some flyers were circulated also in some districts of Beirut, asking Syrians to leave in retaliation to the ISIS beheading two captured soldiers. It's true that some Syrian refugees are making their way into the low skilled labor market and competing for local jobs. However, from a humanitarian perspective, this kind of behavior attacking innocent refugees is unacceptable, especially when some Lebanese started attacking those innocents who are seeking a safe haven, as you mentioned earlier, in Lebanon, and have escaped the brutality of the Syrian regime.
And also from Lebanon, let's talk to Reverend Fadi Daw, Professor of Christian Theology, Interreligious Dialogue and Geopolitics of Religion. Welcome to Straightforward.
Thank you. Thank you.
As a consultant on Muslim-Christian relations, how would you explain the elements that led to the re-rise of Islamic fundamentalism?
Let me say this is a very complex question. And I would like also to distinguish between what we call Islamic fundamentalism in general, that can include different currents and movements under this title. And when we talk about ISIS, I will put it in another category, in fact. So just to clarify that this is not, from my perspective, it's not included ISIS, although there are some common reasons behind Islamic fundamentalism, or I would say terrorism, or terrorist groups like ISIS and
Can you elaborate on these common factors?
Yeah, very briefly. In fact, I will enumerate four main factors